Hey guys, welcome. I just got up and started doing this. Okay, so here we are. Last night I made my Eureka video, which maybe was a little bit excessive to call it Eureka, but it feels like a Eureka moment in a way where I don't know what will come of it, but I'm seeing already like advancement just because of last night's realizations. So it's pretty much a eureka moment. Maybe it is a substantial eureka moment because it's substantial realizations that are I'm starting to map. Okay, so in short, this morning I just started taking pictures of the magnetic anomaly map and then supposing currents based on what I'd realized so far. And so I have this current here cutting across this way. I realized this current here is not actually separating from here. That's like another branch of it, but instead it's going the opposite direction because essentially it's merging back with the mantle puncture hole flow, which goes westward this way and eastward this way. So it's kind of joining the eastward motions. Probably some of it joins the westward motion, but like largely it just crosses over and goes eastward with the eastward emissions, while the westward emissions just have enough momentum to pass the crossover. And so they continue to flow out and out, but then this path merges. Okay, so let's follow this way though. This is what I was initially doing, was just following westward. So just westward, and interestingly, I believe it essentially moves energetically to some balance point first. Like the storm is over here, the puncture hole's over here, the drainage goes just kind of like directly to the equator, is what I believe. The current going to previous equator, and then current going westward along previous equator. And so it goes to it and then along it. Okay. And then it's going along it. Here's Europe, underneath Europe, Northern Europe. And then it, from Northern Europe, continues on under Greenland and into North America, having a width this wide, I believe, largely, or at least like a current down here, there's a current down the middle here around the Appalachians, and then a current here that then overall is filled as one current this wide, but has like distinctly more current in certain locations. And so that current from here ends up showing up again when I guess I should have drawn it here. Let's just put that in there real quick. Right quick. Because initially I was just drawing this green current, so I didn't even bother. But now, let's just put it in. Something of that nature. I don't want to draw too much, and if I don't know where the current exactly is originating from. So just there, and then down. That's good. That will help a little bit. Okay, so that's going underneath Europe and then under Greenland, and then the other way is coming around from under Asia, which we'll get to, and then wrapping around here. And then the current broadly flows to the boundary of Africa, basically. Initially, the boundary of Africa is here. So it's flowing here, meeting resistance. Which I believe is probably because of what I'm about to say with regard to this. And then this current boundary runs into this current where it then kind of like spreads out in an arc, like this region kind of arcs out. I wonder if it's because of the collision of this wave with this wave producing like an arc segment here. It's kind of like an arrow head that's rounded. But then that current passes this current from Europe. It just gets past it, and noticeably it shrinks as it does it. Like whatever gets past it just isn't as much. But also it's higher velocity. Okay, so then it gets past it, past this boundary, and suddenly it flows up this way. So this current starts to flow this way. And maybe like this is how it balanced out over time. So like this current's flowing, this current's flowing. They kind of have like a moving boundary where this really is where it balanced out at. So this current comes down through here and then disperses and comes up here. So this is a new realization I had last night. A major one that I think really, once I realized that it probably is the case, has began to open the door of possibility a little more clearly, of like, oh, that's why kind of things. Eureka. So that current flows across, spreads up here. Noticeably, it goes directly. Maybe we can pull up Google Maps. It goes directly along here and then out here. In part, not the whole of it, but in part. Out here so as to sever this region all the way to where it runs into Africa, where it then begins to go upward and over that way. This way and this way. Although I'm not sure exactly, like this is widening because this was formed, so this is just widening throughout the process as well. But essentially, like when it steady states the current coming across here and across from this opening here produces like the width. And then this portion goes upward. Up here, and starts to collide with this current coming across, producing novas here, and novas in Greenland. Also, the current that comes through here, through this segment here, physically enters into South America down there where they were attached. And then the current that goes beyond the boundary out this way, because some of it from Asia, some of this current goes this way, which then plays into the ocean opening up over here. That's this segment, this here. Whereas this one, the large current, the wide current, hits Australia, or it basically hits resistance of other currents, including this current, probably, maybe even mostly this current, I'm not sure. I think there's another current that's involved in the Mariana Trench or other aspects of, but basically Western Australia has another current that's making Australia. And so the current hits resistance and branches, but especially branches this way. I think it more so does one of these. Like this. Oops. Just like this energetically, and kind of tends to flow this way. Whereas the teal segment flows this way. Teal segment, green segment. Green segment starts to balloon around Australia wrapping around it up here, up this way. And then the current from Asia that goes through Central America and passes the other current enters into South America over here, where it produces a secondary mantle puncture hole after it passes that current. I guess it energetically to like release pressures to just allow for stabilization to occur. It needed to puncture the mantle again, so it did. And it did so after it crossed that current, so that the mantle puncture holes were on opposite sides of that current, pretty much. One's on that current, the other's on the opposite side, or above that current and below, pretty much. The one in Gernora region is above, the one over here is below, so that when this mantle puncture hole occurred, it had a lot of space for current to flow. So then it began to just fan out, which produced the boundaries of South America. And then kind of turn into a flame over here, where it bends back to points, which then goes into Africa. So current from Africa, just cutting across that flame and into Africa. That's when I realized, wait a minute. Because initially I was drawing this with the current here that was just separating, and then as they separated, they put pressure between them to conglomerate materials sufficient to produce this region. But then I realized, wait a minute. It's actually, I'm pretty sure this is what's happening based on these, like around Africa. They don't make sense unless the current is actually cutting this way, west to east. This whole time I've thought it's been going like this. Although it's possible that some segment goes here, and then this one's the west to east one, like underneath it, that then maybe joins it. But essentially, over time, the bulk of the current going westward goes up here, and the bulk of the current going eastward goes here, as a boundary at least. I don't care, phone. Why am I looking at my phone? What do you say, phone? Oh, Apple's got some news that I should listen to so I can be indoctrinated to the only news I need to know. That's what they've been doing, like companies like that. They're like, well, we got this cell phone service. We might as well just give them news. Here you go. Here's just the critical news you need to know so you can be brainwashed into believe the bullshit that we want you to believe. No one needs to. You don't pay attention to much. All you need to know is what we tell you on your phone. Oh, no one's paying attention to the news. Perfect, because I don't need to, because I got the phone telling me everything. Phone, thanks, phone. Thanks for the information, phone. Anyway, so back here. Then I came back to this region where this current's mainly coming up here, crossing over in Greenland region. And then I realized also last night that this current continues across this way, which I've already established. It runs into Mariana Trench, so this current then goes to Mariana Trench, whereas this and crosses this current. So again, we have a cross region here, which is a little anomalously like low and eddies and mountainous terrain. So it's almost like this current going across was overwhelming. So it mostly shaped the terrain, where this one mostly shaped Mariana Trench as a result of it, and just the general trend of it all, but not really playing into like some patch of like square patch of mountains here that's although to a degree it's probably detectable, just not in the shape that the currents appear here by just being two crossing currents. Okay, this then continues, and probably this region's just confusing in terms of what exactly, but then it connects there. So that eastward current really just goes east from Dwarka to North America, pretty much. Just boom, boom, and here it is going east again. Here's that current from Greenland, and then the current from Mexico that hits Australia, because it's hitting Australia, branches up this way along this region. This here, and just creates that zone. And then when the Earth expands, it like overwhelms Australia, so then it starts to produce this one, moving Australia, the current physically pushing against Australia to just move it, so that then we have this current plus a second current that meets resistance again and flows this way. So then it flows this way. So then from under Mexico, hitting Australia, this current branches in two directions. That then one of them, really mainly one of them, this one here, just builds up, hits resistance of these currents over here, and bends. And also crosses into, I'm sure there's crossover and all sorts of things. It's just there's a lot of novas that appear to happen here to really rearrange the region. But this current goes across and builds this archipelago with eddies at the end. And with this like feature that's here in the magnetic anomaly map. I might have drawn it a little more like pronounced than it truly is, like down here. It's sort of like a center of the novas that just generally, like a DNA double helix, flows this way, or several double helices just flowing this way, and then produces there. Makes me think of DNA. Oh, that's what DNA is. There's something of that nature. Like, whoa. Which that feature also like creates this divide, this weird like positive negative divide where there's a bunch of space and a bunch of material sorted down this dividing line. Okay, so that's my present progress. Maybe let's spend like a few minutes seeing if I can add some more details. Because essentially, at some point, the current going up this way it's going across here this way, but it's also propagating this way. So it probably just begins to open this space enough where then finally it opens this, begins to like create novas to open the space, and this ring of novas ensues, which then materially affects the current, because initially the current's just coming across from under Greenland, but instead, like as the Earth expands, the current starts to go more like down the fault lines, pretty much the fault lines, and then just pushing outward. So generally down this region, more so across time, to basically, instead of going in here for the Mariana Trench, it goes this way and starts to fill this region and wrap around, fully wrapping around, where it probably, this current flowing this way, since it's a different current, different temperature, probably doesn't mix well. It just kind of bounces off it and wraps around. And then when it wraps around this segment, it creates the shallogram top of Earth, but then runs into the currents, this current that's was going through Greenland at least. That's still there. Like there's still material, there's still mass, there's still, because of the current, just stuff there. But then this flows around and runs into it, but it's a seemingly a greater source of current here to hold this intact, maybe because the current's still flowing across this way too, and that way, and pretty much just blocks it and builds up this material, which then forces this current wrapping around more down this channel, at which point it cuts across this way. This narrow channel then cuts across here, and it's probably doing this initially, like this fault line and this opening is happening enough where there's just like a ring here, so that this current cuts across here and begins to produce these novas to then really open up the space to allow for more current to flow. I suspect, at least. And probably also relating to this current coming across, colliding maybe with this current here coming across this way, which then collides generally around here, producing this nova, and just these like nova centers here. But this current from the puncture hole kind of holds the boundary and just flows through along the equator while this bounces off. I assume the equator. I'm still kind of assuming the equator, so pardon me if it's not true when I keep saying that. Okay, but the current does do this, where it wraps around and hugs Greenland and flows down here now. And at that point, it's a materially different current than the one going through underneath Greenland. It's going this way, and it physically bends this way for some reason to fill this region, I guess. It's more able to fill this region, probably. Probably that, like this current was creating these shallogram features backward between the two currents, pinching, like they were just kind of pinching, squeezing current out this way. But because the currents generally were this way and generally this way, they created like a triangle corner that the back current flowed from. But still, this region was relatively empty because of the lack of a direct current inflowing. So when this current went across and was able to like pass the shallogram's boundary, looks like the shallogram held it, like this bubble region just kind of held the pressure to hold this current to generally flow to here, at which point it runs into the resistance from a current from Dwarka's puncture hole, the mantle puncture hole, flowing this way, which then kind of fills this region. Mind you, it also continues this way, this way, this way. I noticed this yesterday. This way, this way, this way, this way, right through here. Right across through Greenland, right here, where like the Iceland eddies that formed Iceland are most pronounced because of that cross stream that's probably narrow and like high velocity, and then that continues here and that stream. So like this right here is what caused this stream that then ends up here. So like this boundary is limited to this stream that came this way. And so it's possible that initially the stream was wider, and then an eddy formed when this current from the North Pole region came in across, met resistance, and because it was more head-on instead of like at a substantial angle, a head-on collision produced this like relatively flat region with a triangle off of it to redirect the currents around it. So a portion of the current went around here and created the Kirst anomaly, where another portion of the current, where is this coming from? Here? I guess just straight across, like there. Yeah, probably. Like straight across here is going here and then reflecting. And that at which point that this produces the Himalayas. Whereas this current that's flowing this way is producing the ophiolites, the oceanic basalts of the Tethys Ocean visible in the Himalayas. Like that aspect of the Himalayas is more fed by this current, whereas when this current arrives on the scene and it hits this reflection point and bends off it, it really gives rise to the Himalayas, where beforehand there wasn't that current there to do it until this space opened so that the current could be deflected that way. I'm thinking this probably happened in a similar way. It's just where did it come in? There's an eddy this way. There's a current generally this way that went into here, but then it also branches off this way. So it's reasonable it just branched off like that way and hit resistance of this current across here. It hit the resistance of it and started to build a wall and essentially filled this region with mass. Just pushed material in, and the structure itself stayed formed because the currents were just so constant throughout the process, generally speaking, so as to produce another he's not. Fuck. Yeah, so that happened. This current collides with this. It branches off this way. And it probably branches off this way. It just generally begins to flow this way, where it then separates from this current over this way because it's running into this resistance. There's a current generally cutting across here. So this branching current that's here, that goes in here and here because it's colliding, wraps around here, runs into resistance there, and just generally tends to go up this way, wrapping around, and then in along the side here. Yeah. At some point, it would be useful for me to really try to pinpoint how these currents interacted with Australia, especially Western Australia. Eastern Australia I've got figured out well enough, this region, to at least like be like, well, it was positioned it was positioned here for sure. It was connected here, and generally it was generally here-ish. Connected to probably up here as well to a degree. And then Antarctica was below it. This map is really definitely half decent for that. Noticeably, right on this map, here's the Dwarka mantle puncture hole attack location, and the current flows this way to the west, so we're following this westward propagation. Which then fans out probably around here then, I don't know, like this region, this stretch fans out underneath Greenland here, generally across. But then the other direction, so there's one westward propagation and an eastward propagation, so they're noticeably kind of in line with one another. This right here, because it was in line, really reinforces that it was just like flowing outward in a simple manner, but on a complex surface. And then it essentially reached, so when it went westward, it went between, this is probably pretty accurate, between Antarctica and India here, and then it reached Australia here, where it reaches is probably where it deflects also. So it deflects off of this pressure coming in from this current. That's just essentially running into here, and then the current flowing this way is just deflected to then flow more down along the coast here and then into North America. So this current ends up going this way, this way, this way. And then once it here, it then flows this way, where it then meets the resistance there and just tends back towards to flow again, or this way and then this way, or separate off that way too. Pretty much going here and going back to the current path. Or this one, did I say them all? The one going this way goes there. The one going this way runs into Antarctica, or yeah, Antarctica-Australia boundary. Runs into the western coast of Australia pretty much at the Antarctica-Australia boundary, seemingly. At the lowest point, at least. Like, here, this current is probably, here's Antarctica right here, probably like that. And then Australia starts up that way, just based on the currents there. Right here. So it runs in there and then branches out and starts to produce the ocean as like a positive negative. One goes beneath the crust, one goes around the crust, pretty much. And what else? I think that's pretty good for now. I'll be back with more as I continue to map this out, but like huge progress, right? See you guys soon.